And I simply want to title this today, The Old Path. The Old Path. We just got through experiencing generations after generations, step by step, transformation that has taken place, and they all ended was indicative of what has occurred in the 89 years. Beloved, one of the most important reasons for having and using what the church knows as creeds and covenants and articles of faith in the church is that we may know where the church has stood theologically in the past. It ought to talk about what we believe, what we understand the word of God to have said to us. When we know this and we stand in the same place as they stood, then we're expressing the unity of ourselves with the church, with the past, and also it shows of the faithfulness of the church to preserve the order of God. Without covenants, without creeds, without theology, without something to talk about who we are and what we believe, we have what is known as theological chaos. We believe so many things to nobody believe anything that's worth standing on. Churches that have forsaken covenants, forsaken faith, or ignore them, they are going back to what is known as apostasy, which means that while they show up, they never expect God to appear. It's amazing how we can sit sometime and feel that I'm all right if so-and-so is all right. If they can get by, then I have no problem. Yes, but here in Jeremiah 6:16, the prophet exhorts us to regard the old path. As a matter of fact, he uses the illustration of a man standing at a section in the fork of a road, and he's observing that there are many people who are coming by, and this traveler wants to know the right path to lead him to the right place. He noted that there are several that are going down a road that seems to be broad, and yet the news is coming back that even though many is going down the road, they are getting lost along the way. They are adhering to so many things till nobody seems to be winding up at the same place. Till finally an old man comes down, and an old traveler looks at him and points to a narrow, worn, torn trail and say, you got to go through this path, through the hidden bushes, and that is the good way that will lead you to where you want to go. Well, it almost sounds like Jesus, for he says, broad is the way that leadeth to destruction, but narrow is the road that leads to life everlasting. Not only did Jesus know that, Jeremiah knew that. Jeremiah passed this verse with all kinds of exhortation. Look at the text. First of all, he says, stand. That refers to taking the time to think where you come to a cross. Take the time to stand and just don't hurriedly go anywhere, but stand there long enough and reason where you're going. And then it says, stand at the crossroad and look. In other words, just don't follow people because they're following, or they seem to be going that way. Look at how they're going. Look at where they're going. And then he says, not only do I want you to look, but he says, ask for the ancient path. Well, he says to use the word stand, and then he says see, which means spend time observing and assessing where you will go before you blindly plow on somewhere else. And then he says ask for the old path. the good old way. Ask someone who will know. You see, everybody hadn't gone through enough to tell you how to get to where you need to go. Ask some people who had some experiences. Ask some folk who know what it is to know Jesus. Every church folk ain't a saved folk. Yes, sir, we need to go back to some old time ways. And I know we got a modern age, we got a modern time, but Jesus the same yesterday, today, and forever. Come on, we gotta learn to tell young folk the truth. You gotta stay on your knees till something happens. You can't read a book and get it out of a Life magazine. You just can't look somewhere else and think I got it here. You see, it ain't about moving, it ain't about shouting. We ought to tell folk it ain't how much you jump, it's how much you live. Yeah, and when he said that, then he used the word walk in the old way. Why did he say the old way? Everybody wants something new, but there are some things that can't change. You see, salvation is a solid position. It didn't happen with Obama coming in. It didn't happen with the Bush years. It's been around a long time. And Jesus even said, except the man be born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God. That's an old path. Yeah, and somehow or another we believe all we got to do is be churched. The reason the church seemed to be going literally to hell is because we are putting everybody in place that has nothing to do with Jesus Christ. Yeah, it's amazing. If you're smart, you can be a leader. Yeah, it's sort of like many of us run around with smartphones but dumb operators. Yeah, got all kind of smart equipment, but the folk who operate it ain't smart. That reason I ain't got one. Jeremiah brings this prophecy to Judah soon before the captivity, about 3 or 4 years before they get brought into captivity. Spiritually, things were a disaster in Judah. You notice that in the last 2 verses, really, of chapter 5, it talks about how things were really, really bad. Yeah, and it talked about, it said, gotten to the point until even the leaders let you do anything you want to do. And you say you're safe. Everybody say they're all right. Has this house, which bears his name, he said, has now become a den of thieves, that you can go, a den of robbers, you can go in and just rob God of everything. And you think you're supposed to have anything that you want, and it's all right. And yet he deals with this chapter. He goes forth and he said this is God's assessment of the spiritual things. He calls it a wonderful and horrible thing. How does he call judgment on a people a wonderful and a horrible thing? Well, what he's saying is that it's good is happening. Because he wondered how long can we continue to walk away from him and nothing ever happens? How long can we continue to follow in our own way and don't follow his command? Well, and then he said, it's a horrible thing. I hate to see people destroyed, but I can't tolerate sin in my view. Well, let me tell you, not only that, let me just hit everybody here. For he says, as a matter of fact, he said, it's astounding. Why is it? Because number one, he said, even the prophets teach false doctrine. He said, the priests even rule with a strong and merciless hand. And here's the disaster. He said that my people love it. They love it when the minister don't tell them the right stuff. They love it when they hear a lie. They love it when they get off me and get on somebody else. They love it when you don't chastise, because it makes, instead of it saying it ought to be fixed, we're saying hot dog is my time now. If they can get by, I can get by too. And many of us are loving it. As a matter of fact, he said we've grown so intense in our doing that sin has become the order of the day. Sin doesn't even bother. Let me ask you a question. Are there demons in the church? Then how can they stay here comfortably? If demons are here, how can they sit in your church with you, on your pew, and they never be rattled or never be bothered? Why? Because many of us have settled in and say it's all right to live any life you want to, just don't mess up. Look, if you will, it's a sad day. To this Judah, Jeremiah speaks in verse 16. Thus said the Lord, stand ye in the ways and see, and ask for old paths. Where is the good way? And walk therein, and you shall find rest for your soul. But listen, did the text say, but they said, we will not walk therein. Well, let's look here. First of all, when you look at the old paths, the first thing you got to ask is, what are they? What are the old paths? Jeremiah's message in this verse must have sounded to Judah like something like an out-of-tune instrument in an orchestra, because Judah is close to celebrating 1,000 years in existence as a nation. And as a matter of fact, 1,000 years of great progress. They've seen, it's said, as a matter of fact, they've seen God bring them and free them out of slavery in Egypt. And they've seen the rise of many nations around them and the fall. They had made contrasts with these neighboring nations, and by the enrichment of their cultural life and their economy, they have hobnobbed with it and came out all right. Yeah, they were advanced in their world of religion, having shaken off some of the primitive beliefs that their fathers had taught them as staunchly, and saying that we don't have to do this. Every time God told them not to do it, they said it won't hurt. Every time he said stay away from it, he said it's all right as long as it just bothers you. And now over all of this advancement, like the uncommonly sound of a budge blast, of a bugle blast more or less, it seems like the prophet is saying you got to stand in the way. Ask for the old path. In other words, he's saying where you're going, you're about to run into total destruction. Well, let me tell you something. I want to warn you, First.Baptist, how long can we not listen to God? We got to get back in some old paths. Some paths that will cause for chastisement. Some paths that will cause for discipline. Some paths that will cause for the hand of God being what reigns over our lives. Yes, you see, the thing is, we live such secluded lives that we don't even get close to each other. Why? Because I don't want nobody knowing my business. Well, newsflash, God sees everything you do. He hears every word you say. He knows you're going in and you're coming out. He even watches you while you sleep. Everything that is to know. As a matter of fact, he takes account every day. He numbers even the very hairs on your head. And you think God don't know what you're doing? How is it that you can stand in his face and say, bless me, Lord? When we bring to him, the Bible talks about bringing rotten offering to him and say, God, I give you my rotten stuff. And God say, how are you going to give me your worst? He say, if you really want to give it to somebody, try to give it to the governor. That's what he says. See if he'll accept your just anything. Try to get an IRS just whatever you want them to have. You think they'll accept it? But yet we go on Sunday morning, we think we can just give God nothing. We can sit and we can bow our head and yawn at the motion and the move of God and saying it's all right. And